Hello, fellow World of Tank Blitzers and future Mumrads. I'm Littlefinger. Today, sharing a little more knowledge, this time talking about the American tank lines. So, what do we know in general about the American tank lines? Well, they are versatile tanks but lack specialization, and then I would say they are just average in all categories. Nothing below average, nothing above average. They have good strong turrets, and so they perform well, hold down. They do have good view range and terrain resistance. Probably the best thing about American tanks is their gun depression and reload times. So let's go ahead and jump in and take a look at the medium M48 Patton line. So here's the M48 Patton. Looking at the stats on it, with a speed limit of 45 kilometers per hour, it is one of the slowest tanks. You compare it to the Leo, they're at 60-65. It does traverse very well. I think that might be about the best in the class. Looking at the hull armor at 152 and 177, it is the best of all mediums as far as armor goes. The damage there at 240 damage per shot, with a 181 millimeter penetration value is really good. Rate of fire at 9.5 gives you an average damage per minute of just over 2,200, and that's actually on the low side of all the mediums. I think the Object 140, 62A are closer to the 24 to 2,500 range, and the Leo is up there at like 26. So, damage per minute isn't everything. You got to have a shot to be taking all the time. So, with the gun elevation there at -9 degrees, it is by far the best. You look at I think it's a 62A at 5%. And so my gameplay of this really suffered at first because I tried to use it more as a brawler, like the 54, 62. But this tank is much better if you use on hills, use that gun depression, get some good slopes, it's just an all-around good, fun tank to play. So let's jump in and take a look at the American heavy line, the T1, T29, T32, M6. These are all fun tanks to play. They are balanced as far as penetration, armor, mobility, and firepower. They do have strong turrets with very good gun depression and are really good for a hull down game style. They do have weak sides, especially weak rear armors. Throw HE into the back of any American heavy that you see for sure. And when you get up to the T110E5, the commander's hatch is pretty weak. But overall, these tanks are mobile. They've got good accuracy, and they are really fun to drive. One of my favorite lines. So looking at the stats on the T110E5, with a speed limit there of 37 kilometers per hour, it is a little bit slower than the Russian heavies, but a good bit faster than the Germans. Hull armor at 254 and 203 is certainly within average for its class. Shell damage there at 400 hit points, with a armor penetration of 258 is also very good. The rate of fire at 6 shells per minute gives you a DPM of 2,400, which outside of the British heavy, I think that is the highest in the class. And then accuracy. This is where this gun really excels. And also an 8% gun depression. This is my favorite heavy tank that I really like to drive, as long as you are wiggling, moving side to side when you're on the reload, just because of that weak commander's hatch. You got to make it difficult for your opponents to hit that. And if you're staying hull down and facing your opponents, don't show the side. This is a fun tank that will do a lot of damage in a short amount of time. So the American TD line has two distinct lines. At the lower tiers, they are more mobile and have a variation of guns that are fairly powerful. They do eventually split into a turret and a turretless TD. Because of that, my recommendation is to go down the T25, T28 prototype, T30, and the T110 E4. I think this is a much more enjoyable grind. The turretless tanks are really slow. You can find yourself getting to the battle and half of your team has already been killed. So let's take a look at each of these in more detail. The T110 E3 has really good frontal armor. The commander's hatch is stronger than its counterpart on the bottom there. It has a faster reload at 3.5 versus 3.0, which gives it a higher DPM, but the cons are that it doesn't have a turret. This is your typical TD. The T110 E4 on the bottom has a turret and better mobility, and is used, I think, a little bit better if you prefer being a sniper. It doesn't have as good of a gun depression, obviously the slower reload time, and the commander's hatch is weak. And then the turret only turns 90 degrees. You cannot turn this 360 degrees, so it's not very good as a frontline brawler. So if we compare some of these stats here, the E3 with 24 kilometers per hour is much slower than the E4 at 35. Hull armor 305 on the E3 versus 260 on the E4. Obviously, that extra armor kind of slows this vehicle down a good bit. Damage is just about exactly the same there with the damage and penetration values, so your rate of fire on the E3 being increased is going to give you a higher DPM. The aim time is a little bit better on the E4, and but it does not have as good a gun depression there at 6% versus the 8%. And I do not have either of these two tanks, so I did a little bit of research, and it seems like this is a continual argument online as to which of the two is better. So my recommendation is to go down the E4 line, just because the grind through the previous tanks is a little bit easier. So that's going to wrap up my general view of the American tank lines. As always, guys, stay safe out there, have fun, don't get fingered. Littlefinger out.